And since 2017, there have been a huge increase in the number of wildfires in California, along with an increase in the loss of lives. There have been many lessons learned from these wildfires. We've also had new analysis that's been from the vegetation management plan and the recently adopted, updated, sorry, it's still going through council, but Oakland local hazard mitigation plan that I believe that was presented to the commissioners at the planning commission recently. Along with there's a new evacuation analysis from Zone Haven that has shown that the problem in evacuating vehicles in a wildfire is not just narrow roads or long dead end streets, but there's also choke points that are caused when there's multiple roads that funnel into a limited number of intersections that causes vehicles to back up and potentially not be able to escape a fast moving wildfire in time. And so because of this new analysis and lessons that have been learned from other wildfires, it was decided that it's necessary to prohibit JADUs and ADUs in the entire CAL FIRE designated very high fire severity zone as a matter of public safety. Sorry, my slide is stuck here. Okay. So ADUs could triple the density in the very high fire hazard severity zone. Zoning in the area has always remained lower density because of the constant underlying risk of wildfires and capacity limits of the infrastructure. And recently, the state attorney general has actually filed motions to intervene in recent lawsuits of a development that was approved in the very high fire severity zone in San Diego County. And basically the attorney general is quoted as saying that while local government, basically devastating wildfires have become the norm in recent years, with dozens of deaths and whole towns forced to evacuate. That's why local governments must address the wildfire risks associated with new developments at the front end. It is imperative for public safety and required by the law. So staff understands that there's a need of adding more housing units to the city, but the need should not outweigh the risk of public health and safety. There are appropriate areas for new housing growth, and most of the city of Oakland falls within those areas, but building new units that would risk not only the lives of existing residents, but new residents alike does not make for good planning practice. And also planning staff has been coordinating their analysis and recommendations with the experts in the fire department. They're in the front lines of fighting these wildfires. And we have letters of support from the fire chief and the director of interdepartment operations office of the city administrator, who oversees the city's wildfire prevention group. And now I'm gonna actually let Deputy Chief Nicholas Luby take over the presentation. And I'll keep moving the slides for you, Chief Luby, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Laura. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. As Laura said, Deputy Chief Nick Luby with the fire department, and I am joined in my office by Jessica File, who is our emergency services division manager. Commissioners and members of the public, thank you for the opportunity to present on this very important item and a life safety item seen from the fire department perspective. The very high fire hazard severity zone is mapped by CAL FIRE and is a designated area that's created by law throughout California for areas that have a very high potential for fire. They use multiple factors to figure it out, including fire history, existing and potential fuel, predicted flame lengths, potential ember cast of how far embers will fly and uninhibited, terrain, and just typical fire weather that's experienced by an area. And these are situations that we find in the Oakland Hills, and that's why we find ourselves designated as one of these zones. And this is the highest level zone that can be classified by CAL FIRE. These maps are updated periodically. They are going through a review process now. As we all know, fire behavior in the state of California has changed drastically over the last several years, with last year over 4 million acres being burned statewide, the most acreage that we have seen to date. Climate change is what's most driving this, and it's getting worse and worse. As many know, we are now seeing tree mortality throughout the Oakland Hills and throughout the region, which is just going to exacerbate the potential for increased fire behavior throughout the East Bay Hills and throughout the state. We used to call this the new norm in the fire service. We've changed that nomenclature to the new extreme. Fires are creating their own wind events, they're creating their own tornadoes, and fire is developing faster than we can actually study it, is what we're finding with the way things are changing. What comes with the challenges with the climate change is obviously increased temperatures, the drought that we are currently experiencing, the high winds that we experienced during the red flag days. The red flag days are coming more often, they're lasting longer, and they are starting sooner and ending later. There was a time when a red flag warning and a potential for high wind event with low humidity, we'd only see in September, October. As many probably know on the call, and if you don't, we have already had our first red flag warning throughout the East Bay Hills for this year, and that is unprecedented. And what the meteorologists say, this is just going to get much worse before it gets better. Next slide. So as we've been working with the Planning Commission and discussing the ADUs, one of the tools that came to us was the Zone Haven application. This is a new solutions application that we're going to be using to facilitate evacuations. It actually will be going fully functional on June 15th of this month. And it is something that's been much needed. And what happened with the Zone Haven implementation process is we started actually being able to see car counts and how many vehicles we're going to have to evacuate throughout certain zones during a large scale event or a small scale event, but the large scale event is what concerns us. And what we started seeing through this modeling is what we have seen throughout the state during large scale evacuations. Yes, the narrow streets create many issues for us with getting emergency vehicles in and getting community members out. But the bigger issue that we're finding is what we're running into, what we call choke points, that the infrastructure can't support large scale evacuations. Everyone funnels into a certain street network, and the street network can't support it. And we've seen it at the campfire in Paradise, where 86 individuals perished. We did obviously see it in the 1991 fire, where the 25 individuals perished. And we're seeing it over and over again. Ventura at the Thomas fire, up in the North Bay fires, that the infrastructure, due to these fast moving fires, can't support these evacuations, and the traffic can't get through the choke points. As I said, the recent fires that we've seen statewide are getting more catastrophic and more fatalities with each year going on. The other part that we have a hard time analyzing is what we call the additional challenges. And those are going to be the down trees, the power lines, the routes blocked by fire activity, or disabled vehicles. And this is one of the case studies that happened in Paradise with the campfire, which is a community of 22,000, not that large of a community, that had done robust evacuation planning and had a concrete system. What they didn't anticipate is when the winds picked up, that the trees came down, that the power lines came down, and what they thought were emergency access routes quickly became blocked, and alternate routes had to be used. Once again, doubling capacity on evacuation routes that they thought would only have a certain amount of cars, now it was taking the double the quantity of cars, because what they thought would be a primary evacuation route was no longer available. And this happened on 2-lane roads, 4-lane roads. A lot of individuals talk about, if we have 4-lane roads like Keller and Redwood and roads like that leading into the the East Hills, those should be able to handle it. Potentially, there's these unseen issues that we're going to run into that potentially will shut those roads down, and then we are funneling everything to another road. The other challenge is emergency vehicles coming in, and I'll show you a video real shortly of a scenario where that ran into at the Fort McMurray fire. If it's an infrastructure issue, and if we add more residents into the hills, or the concern is that we will run the risk of impacting infrastructure that much more. Next slide. So real briefly, before I show you the demo, On Zone Haven, I'll share my screen with you and I'll run through two different scenarios just real quickly so that you can start seeing how the car counts start multiplying as we start evacuating more zones. The first scenario I'm going to run through for you is the Oakland Hill fire of 1991. And this is a general car count. We're using day count. We estimate 1 vehicle per home during the day, 2 vehicles per home during the night, evacuating from evacuated residents. So you'll see the daytime car count and the impacts that it starts having as you get closer and closer to the main freeways. And I'll remind everyone in 1991, Highway 24 became closed down due to power lines across it. So once we lost Highway 24, that just created a whole nother backing up of the evacuees trying to get out of the North Oakland Hills. And another scenario I'll run is one of my concerns is a fire off of Redwood Road on the backside of Skyline Boulevard that starts back there that comes up over the hill near Skyline High School. Just to give you a general idea of the car counts and infrastructure impact that we're looking at. And then after that, I want to share a quick video of the Fort McMurray fire that took place in 2016. That was a fire that started on May 1st of 2016, 12 miles from town, that they didn't believe was going to come into town. And it's a major case study in the fire service. And 2 days later, on May 3rd, there was a change in direction of wind, and they had a no-notice evacuation of trying to evacuate 66,000 people. And there's an individual that took some pretty impressive video of himself trying to evacuate the town. And you'll notice in the video, these are wide streets, 30 plus foot streets that all channel into highway access. And you can see how quickly everything just clogs up and that emergency vehicles can't get in and evacuees cannot get out. In the Fort McMurray fire, they ended up losing 2,400 homes in that fire. And the one other thing before I take over the screen was the thing that we've noticed also, or we're experiencing, is where we used to think fires would stop at freeways. They no longer stop at freeways. And the eye-opening experience we had was the North Bay fire, which I personally responded to on that Sunday night. And when the fire jumped Highway 101, a 6-lane plus shoulders freeway, and ended up in Coffey Park, a community that no one ever thought would be impacted by fire and was devastated by fire, that's when I realized that it's very probable, if the right conditions exist and we get into the weather event, a significant weather event, that fire can come across Highway 580, get into East Oakland, and has a great potential to actually end up down at Eastmont Mall or MacArthur Boulevard. What we found is when Mother Nature has a plan, it's very hard for us to stop. And that's when we have to switch into a preservation mode and life safety mode and an evacuation mode. So I've spoken to some individuals that have said, well, why below 580? Because very easily with the winds of 60, 70 miles an hour, the fire will come across 580 into the communities below 580. So I will share my screen now.
And just for timing, you are at 25 minutes for the staff presentation. So just to let you know.
Okay, thank you. Can you see a map?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the North Oakland Hills. And just real quickly, I'll run through. Fire started on Buckingham. What I'm doing here is I'm starting to click zones that would start evacuating. And I'm just going to do the fire perimeter. On the right-hand side, you can see the vehicle count. And these numbers that are showing up on the map are estimated car counts that are going to have to come through intersections. So as I add the zones that were affected in the fire on 1991, and again, I'm just doing the fire perimeter. This is not including anyone that we put under evacuation warning or anyone outside the fire perimeter that we would include. You can see that the reds and the purples start increasing. And these are amount of vehicles that we as public safety have to facilitate getting out as quickly as possible. As we have stated and as planning has stated, the concern is the infrastructure, it's not a concern. We know the infrastructure as it stands now will not support a rapid and quick evacuation. And unfortunately, as we've found in fires throughout California over the past few years, we have had many people perish inside their vehicles due to this congestion. So highest number is 1,534 vehicles that we're trying to access on the Highway 13 if it's open at Broadway Terrace. And then I'll run a second scenario for East Oakland, just to give another example. And this is a scenario that we train on in the fire department for Redwood Road behind Skyline High School for a vehicle car fire down Redwood Road. Here's Skyline Boulevard. The other thing that we take into account is the transient population that this does not take into account. And that would be 2,000 students at Skyline High School, students at Merritt College, Sunrise Convalescent Home, other schools that add to the impact of the evacuation. And that is very hard to take into account because it depends on the time of day. But again, you're seeing the impacts on the infrastructure that we are going to anticipate experiences as it stands now with the current population, with Redwood Road being overly congested with trying to get individuals onto Highway 13. And just real quickly, I'll show you the video, which is one of the videos we use for case studies on evacuation and planning. And this is the Fort McMurray fire. As I said, it's a bedroom community. It's a large, wide road. You can see that the vegetation comes up to the side, and there's a couple of things I'm going to ask that you notice in the video. People are trying to adhere by traffic laws. The radiant heat from this fire gets to be too hot. This could be any of the roads coming out of Oakland Hills trying to get on the Highway 13. And as you notice, emergency vehicles are trying to come in to try to save property. And as people have to start taking other lanes, they run into the obstruction of blocking the emergency vehicles. And once this fire engine passes, there's one other thing I'd like you to note that you'll see as we switch camera angles is the ember cast. And ember cast is the enemy in our fires. And this is how fire jumps half mile, 3/4 mile ahead. If you notice on the back here, this front yard, this landscape front yard, you see the small fire in that front yard. I know a lot of conversation has been had about what you should do more on vegetation management. The challenge is on these large fires, and here's another one, bush catching on front fire. If you watch that bush catch on fire within the next 30 seconds, that house will be on fire. And vegetation management is an excellent tool. When we hit winds and fire with this ferocity, that the homes become our fuel. And once the homes catch on fire, it's going from home to home, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. In this camera angle, you can see that now we've taken up all lanes of the road. We have vehicles starting to drive across landscaping, over hills, doing anything they can to try to get out of this community. And this is hitting that major intersection, which would be similar to the bottom of a Redwood Road or Keller or Shepherd Canyon. And it just gets into complete congestion of trying to get out of the harm's way. And I'll move the video up. And the challenges associated, obviously people have loved ones and pets and property and belongings. They're trying to get in while everyone else is trying to get out. And that always adds to the congestion that we have found over time with all the case studies. And one of the biggest challenges, or another challenge other than fire and blowing embers, is the zero visibility. This this video here was shot at 1800 hours or 6 p.m. in the afternoon. And you'll notice that it will go into complete darkness, which is another challenge with facilitating a quick and rapid evacuation from a fire zone. And they will exit it. You'll see shortly they will exit from the area of the fire, the front fire front moving, and they are back now into safety. So it hopefully gives you just a general idea of what it's like to go through an evacuation and the challenges associated with it. And with that, I will, I guess, hand it back to Laura or back to the chair.